Hi, this is the screencast for the 2016 Paper 1 Ordinary Level Section B question 9. This question is worth 45 marks, so it's important to do well. Excuse me. Now, a lot of text here, but even without looking at the specifics of it, we have function notation. Now, they're not using the typical f of x, but they're using different letters to notate things. I can see this is a linear equation, or linear function. Okay, there's no power of 2 or 3, so it's not quadratic or cubic. Keep going. I see here, this is again function notation, and this is an exponential model. So it has a power, but it's a power of a variable. So if we go through, company A uses the following formula to charge a customer for a job. Again, it's linear, so if you graph it, it's going to be a straight line. Where A of H, okay, H being a function of, what's A? The company, okay, is the cost of the job in euro, and H is the length of time that the job takes in hours. So the more hours it takes as the input, the overall output is the cost of the job. Next, again, we have the company B uses the following formula to charge a customer for the same job, where B of H is the cost of the job, and H is again the length of time that it takes to do the job. So they're two different functions describing the cost of a job for two different companies, basically. So let's look at the content of part A, part 1. No, it haven't put in the amount of marks this is on the next page either. However, complete the job below to show what company A charges and what company B charges for jobs that take up to 5 hours. Where necessary, give the charge corrected near cent. So there's a rounding. That's usually worth 1 mark if you forget to round. So for the first function, you're putting 0 in as the input. Remember, the input here is the H. So you ask basically what's A of 0. I even put it in there. It'll be 30 plus 9.5 times 0. That'll reduce to 0. So the answer for the first one will be 30. Okay. You keep going then your calculator, which is preferable. Put 1 in instead. So 30 plus 9.5 times 1 is the same thing as 30 plus 9.5, which is 39.5. Now I'm just doing them there in the rough. You continue. You end up with your different answers, and it's getting progressively more complicated due to the bigger variable. You then move on to calculate the cost of the job for company B. You put 0 in, so that will become 10 times 1.74 to the power of 0. Now, the root of powers and the power of 0 is 1, so it becomes 10 times 1. So the first one will be 10. Okay. The second one would be larger, be 10 times 1.74 to the power of 1. So, and the power of 1 is itself. So it's 10 by 1.74, which moves the decimal place once, be 17.4. Now we're okay with the rounding so far because it's to the nearest cent. The only reason that would become a problem would be if it had a 3 decimal places. I'm assuming it's going to happen at some stage for them to feel necessary to say that. So we'll go on to the answers. I think I've already rounded here in the answers. So first 2 that I got were correct. I'm assuming the ones I got after are correct. So make sure you're able to do that. Make sure you're able to program the calculator. And I've done here, down here, I've shown 2 sample calculations. That way, if your calculator was wrong or you were doing the wrong thing all the time, even though these answers are wrong, the sample calculation would get you marks. Okay, because you're showing you one step towards the right answer. Okay, that's question 1, A part 1. Now, A part 2, there's a graph, obviously. On the grid below, draw separate graphs to show the charge for company A and for company B. Label each graph clearly. So you have your axes already built in as time versus charge. So the graph should show the cost to company, and you should have 2 graphs for company A, company B. Make sure that obviously it says here label, but label company A and company B clearly. Wanna be expecting to be a straight line. An exponential curve should look something like that. Okay, and at some stage, if it draws a straight line, you're going to have a scenario where they both meet. That's going to be important. Or they might ask you to, how much would a company cost if it would do something for 3 hours? And you can bring a line up and bring the line across. Excuse my line, roughly. You're obviously going to use a ruler. And you see that's the type of information I'll be expecting from the next part. So always keep in mind that you should have expectations from your practice of question types. So one thing is be watching out for linear equations, like we already discussed. Now, this graph looks pretty complicated because I have next parts on there that we're reading off, but that's your linear graph that I'm tracking along there. That's company A. And then you have your exponential curve, company B. Now, they don't start from the origin because if you call a company out, even if they haven't worked any minutes, by turning up at your door, they have a charge. So the charge for company B is €10 just to be called out with no work done. Company A is €30 for a call out. Okay, so again, I have parts for the next few parts done. They're like on the graph for reading off. So see them as we go through. That's part 2. Now part B, which company would charge least? That's important. Very important. For a job that takes 2.5 or 2.5 hours to complete. Give a reason for your answer. I hate reasons. So let's go back and see what I did in the graph. So we're looking for 2.5 hours on the x-axis. I have it there, brought it up, and I've done it for both companies, one in a heavy arrow and one in a lighter arrow. When I read across for company B, it's €40 for a 2.5 hour job. Company A, it's, now what's that? 52.5. Depending on the quality of your graph, they'll accept whatever you read for your graph as long as you're reading it right. So even if you think, oh my God, I drew it wrong, or I drew, well, actually, even if you did draw it wrong, they'd accept your incorrect graph as correct for the following parts. So be confident to go ahead with what you know, and you almost ignore the last parts. So come to the answer. Company A would charge. Now I've rounded to 52. Okay, I think I'm almost certain I've checked when I made up the notes. That's within tolerance. From graph, based on my graph, from graph company B would charge €40. Okay. Now I've said all that. Part C then, use your graph to estimate the value of H for which the charge is the same for both companies. Now, I should say this now, it's at this times like this where it's worth pausing the video, making sure you've give your best effort to do the answer. If you get it correct, and you don't need to necessarily listen to the next bit, but if you are getting it wrong, then obviously the focus of the content is important. So I'm going to go back to the graph. The value of H is the same for both companies. Basically, this is going to be where the two lines or two graphs intersect, which would be here. So use your graph to estimate the the value of H when they meet. So they meet here, bring a line down. The x-axis is time, which is in hours, which is H. Okay, so we'd often call that the x-axis, but in this case it's been labeled the h-axis. And this is the charge axis or the cost axis. So I read it down and I'm getting 3 to 4. It's around a quarter of the way. So that could be 3.25 over here. 3.1, 3.2, maybe 3.225. I see what I wrote in the answer. Okay, I went 3.2. Okay. Now, again, they don't expect you to be uber accurate here, but you should try to be as accurate as possible. Okay, and again, it'll be based on the graph you've drawn. Now, I should have put in units. H is 3.2. Okay, I probably messed up here. I should have put in the word hours, because that's the units we're talking about. May or may not have been deducted a mark for that. It just depends on the marking scheme any one year. So part D here, we're getting to the end. Find the difference in cost for a job that takes 6 hours to complete. Okay, so 6 is your time. You're going to calculate it. Okay, you put in for the function for company A put in 6. You could have read it off the graph either. I'm doing it by calculation. Can't see any reason why that's a problem. Again, I'll look back at the graph in a second. Anyway, I got €87 charge for company A for a 6-hour job. Company B put 6 in instead of the variable H. End up with 277.52 for a 6-hour job. Difference of cost, take the two figures away. There's €190 and 52-cent difference. Okay. Now I could use the graph. No, the graph here. This particular is off the graph. So unless you had used your graph paper and be able to fill in 6 and 7 hours, but to do that, you'd have to continue the curve blindly. Or the straight line will be easy. It'll eventually, it's a straight line, so it'll extend on easily. You'd be estimating, and while they didn't directly say don't use the graph, I'm sure the marking scheme allows some marks for that. It would be just not the way they want it. But then again, it would still get marks. That's part D. Okay, that's the end of that. Apologies again for missing the class. This screencast is designed to give students a chance to engage with the class if they're not able to make it on the Tuesday. Okay, thank you.